She had a smile that could change the temperature of a room. Not the practiced smile of someone performing warmth for an audience. The real kind. The kind that started behind her eyes before it ever reached her mouth. The kind that made strangers feel like old friends and coworkers feel like they actually mattered in a world that did not always make them feel that way. Her name was Clara Dawson. She was 36 years old. She had a husband who loved her, 2 children who needed her, and a job she had shown up to every single morning for 6 straight years without missing one day. And on the morning of March 14th, 2021, the woman who had never given a single person around her any reason to worry walked out of her life and left her coffee still warm. Her coffee was still warm. Her phone was still plugged into the charger beside her keyboard. Her lunch, a container she had packed herself the night before with her name written on the lid in black marker, was still in the office refrigerator on the 4th floor of Meridian Financial Services in Columbus, Ohio. Her screensaver was still cycling through vacation photographs. Clara and David on a beach. Tyler and Sophie in Halloween costumes. The 4 of them at a Thanksgiving table somewhere warm and full of the specific noise of a family that loves each other. Her chair was pushed back slightly. Not dramatically. Not the way a chair looks when someone is pulled from it in an emergency. Just the ordinary quiet way a chair looks when someone stood up and intended to come back. She did not come back. And what her husband David would find in the days that followed, alone in a study at 3 in the morning while his children slept, would rewrite every single thing any of them thought they knew about the woman with the warmest smile in every room she had ever entered. Stay with this story all the way to the end, because the most important part of what happened to Clara Dawson is not what happened on March 14th. The most important part is what had been happening to Clara Dawson every single ordinary day for the 20 years before that morning, while the people who loved her most sat across from her at dinner tables and stood beside her in office hallways and spoke to her on the phone every single day and never once, not fully, understood what they were watching. This is the story of a woman who was too good at being fine, and what it costs a human being to perform that particular skill for 20 years without anyone ever asking them to stop. Before we go inside what happened on March 14th and in the days before it, I need to ask you something. Think about the most capable person in your life right now. The one who always shows up. The one who never complains, never asks for anything, never gives you a single reason to worry about them. The one who remembers your birthday and asks about your sick parent by name and stays late when everyone else has gone home. The one you would describe, if someone asked, as someone who has it completely together. Now be honest with yourself. When did you last ask that person how they were really doing? Not as a pleasantry, not as a passing hello in a hallway, but as a real question, with the full weight of someone who genuinely wants to sit with whatever the real answer is. Because everything that happened to Clara Dawson on March 14th, and everything that had been quietly happening to her for 20 years before that morning, comes down to that question, and to the fact that in 20 years, nobody ever truly asked it. 3 questions are going to guide us through Clara's story. The first, how does a person carry something so heavy, so consistently, and so completely alone for 20 years, while surrounded by people who love them, without a single one of those people fully seeing it? The second, what was inside the dark blue journal that David found in the study drawer at 3 in the morning? And what did it tell him about the woman he had built a life with, raised 2 children with, and shared a bed with for 17 years? And the third, and the one that matters most, the one that has stayed with me since I first heard it. What did Clara say, for the first time in 20 years, to a stranger sitting beside her on a bench at a bus terminal in Lexington, Kentucky? What were the first completely honest words she had spoken to another human being after 2 decades of saying nothing but fine? Before we go any deeper into Clara's story, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And please hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. Clara Marie Dawson was born in Columbus, Ohio in 1979. She was the middle child of 3, the daughter of a high school football coach and a registered nurse, and from the very beginning the kind of person whose presence rearranged a room. She was the child who made peace when her siblings argued, the student whose teachers wrote the same thing on every report card year after year. Not just that she was bright, though she was, and not just that she worked hard, though she did, but that she was kind. Specifically, attentively, and practically kind. The kind of kind that notices when someone needs something and does something about it quietly, without needing to be seen. Her fifth-grade teacher told her mother at a parent conference that Clara did not just notice when another child was struggling. She did something about it, without being asked, without needing anyone to see. That was Clara at 10 years old. It never changed. She graduated from Ohio State University in 2001 with a degree in accounting and met her husband David at a mutual friend's backyard barbecue that same summer. David was a construction project manager, steady and reliable in the way that people who work with their hands and their word tend to be reliable. He had a laugh that Clara's closest friend described as the second most infectious thing in the Dawson household after Clara's own smile. David told me that the first thing he noticed about Clara at that barbecue was not her appearance or her warmth. He said the first thing he noticed was that she was actually listening to the person she was talking to. Not performing listening. Not waiting for her turn. Actually listening, with the full weight of someone who was genuinely interested. He said, "I thought I want to know that person." And he did know her. He built a life and a family with her. He just did not know her as completely as he believed. They married in 2004. Their son Tyler was born in 2006. Their daughter Sophie in 2009. By 2015, Clara had been at Meridian Financial Services for 4 years, had been promoted to team lead, and was by unanimous account the backbone of the fourth floor. Her coworker Janet, who sat closest to her for all 6 years Clara was at the company, told me she never once saw Clara have a genuinely bad day. Her manager described her as irreplaceable. Raymond, the security guard who greeted her every morning for 6 years, told the detective who interviewed him after March 14th that Clara remembered the names of his children, asked about them every time she passed his station, and never once forgot a single detail he had shared with her. He said he had always felt, after talking to Clara in the mornings, like she had genuinely been glad to see him. Like he mattered. That was what Clara gave to everyone around her every single day. And nobody stopped to consider what the giving of it cost her. What nobody knew, what the architecture of Clara's daily performance was specifically designed to prevent them from knowing, was that since her early 20s Clara had been living with something she had no name for and had never once told another person the full truth about. It had started in college, and she had described it once, in a journal she kept privately for 11 years, as living behind a pane of glass. Everyone was right there. Life was right there. The laughter and the love and the warmth were right there. But there was always something between her and the full experience of it. Something she could not break through. Something she had taught herself, over years of careful practice, to make certain that no one around her ever noticed. The journal. Nobody knew about the journal. Not David. Not her children. Not her closest friends. Until the night David found it in the study drawer and read every single word. The clinical name for what Clara was living with is persistent depressive disorder, sometimes called high-functioning depression. It is not the same as major depressive disorder, and that distinction matters enormously for understanding why it went unrecognized for so long by everyone around Clara, including the one person who slept beside her every night. Unlike major depressive episodes, which tend to be severe and visible, persistent depressive disorder is defined precisely by its invisibility. The person does not stop functioning. They continue to work, to love, to show up. They laugh at the right moments. They remember your name and your children's names and what you told them 6 months ago. But they do all of it through something that feels from the inside like the world is always slightly muffled, always slightly out of reach, always behind glass. A clinical psychologist who has spent 15 years working with patients whose depression was masked by high functioning told me this. She said, "The most alarming thing about this condition is that it selects for the strongest, most capable people. Their competence becomes their cage. Because the more competent you appear, the less likely anyone is to look closely enough to see what the competence is covering." In October of 2019, Clara's son Tyler, who was 13, was involved in a serious car accident. He was in the back seat of a friend's car when the driver ran a red light and was struck by an oncoming vehicle. Tyler survived with a broken collarbone, 11 stitches on his forehead, and a mild concussion. He recovered completely. But for 48 hours after that phone call, Clara did not know that. And she managed everything. She organized the hospital rotations. She managed David's fear and her own simultaneously without letting her own show. She kept Sophie calm. She answered every call from family. She held the shape of everything together. And that night, after everyone was asleep, she sat at the writing desk in the study and wrote in her journal for 2 hours. She wrote, "I was absolutely, completely, entirely terrified in a way that I could not show to a single person in that room, because every single person in that room needed me to be steady. I have a great deal of accumulated things inside me at this point, and I am not sure how much more the accumulation can hold." In December of 2019, Clara drove to the care facility where her mother Diane had been living since the spring. Diane had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease 4 years earlier. Clara arrived to find her mother in the common room by the window. Diane looked up when Clara came through the door and looked at her daughter with the polite, slightly cautious expression of a person acknowledging a well-meaning stranger. Not a flicker of recognition. Clara sat with her mother for an hour. She held her hand. She talked about the weather and the bird feeder outside. She did everything right. And then she drove home in a silence her journal that night described as the loudest thing she had ever sat inside. She wrote, "I sat in the driveway for 40 minutes. David was in the kitchen. The lights were on. The kids were upstairs. Everything was warm and lit and exactly as it should be. And my mother did not know my face today. I sat in the car until I could go inside. It took 40 minutes. When I went inside, David said dinner was almost ready. I said, great. I helped Sophie set the table. Everything was fine. I am so tired of everything being fine." The COVID pandemic arrived in March of 2020, and with it a change in the structure of Clara's daily life that nobody around her recognized as significant because nothing about it was visible. The closure of Meridian Financial's offices sent Clara home to the kitchen table. And what this change meant for her was that it removed the one structure that had, for 5 years, given her daily life its organizing principle. Work had been more than a job. The rhythm of Meridian Financial, the greetings, the specific demanding texture of being useful and warm and needed in a space full of people had been the mechanism by which she managed the distance between herself and the glass. When that was gone, the mechanism was gone. The performance was still required. The energy was still spent, but nothing was replenishing it. She wrote in the journal in April of 2020, "I have been calling my mother 3 and 4 times a day. She does not always know who I am, but I call anyway because her voice is the one thing that makes the glass feel a little thinner. I think I have been running on a deficit for a long time. I think the deficit is getting larger." Tyler was 14 in 2020, and there were nights that year when he came downstairs for water and found his mother sitting at the kitchen table in the dark. Just sitting, completely still, hands folded on the table in front of her. He stood in the doorway and watched her. And each time she had heard him and turned and smiled that full, immediate, convincing smile, and asked if he was okay and told him to get some rest. And he had gone back to bed, because she was his mother and she had smiled and everything was fine. Sophie was 11. She noticed that her mother had stopped singing in the kitchen. Every Saturday morning for as long as Sophie could remember, her mother had sung while she made pancakes. Not deliberately, not for anyone, just the low, absent-minded humming of a person at ease in themselves. At some point in 2020, the singing stopped. Sophie noticed immediately. She said nothing. She kept the noticing to herself. It frightened her in a way she could not name for almost a year. On a Tuesday evening in November of 2020, with the children upstairs and just David and Clara at the kitchen table after dinner, David looked at his wife and said, "Clara, are you okay?" She looked at him, and the smile came. That full, warm, immediate, completely convincing smile. She held his hand across the table. She said she was tired. She said it had been a long year, and she was looking forward to it being over. She asked him how he was doing. And David, who loved his wife and had just been given a warm hand and a reasonable explanation, answered the question she had asked him. The moment passed. They washed the dishes and went to bed. Clara's journal the following morning read, "He asked me last night if I was okay. I was right there. His hand was warm. I could have said something true. I smiled. I said I was tired. I held his hand and redirected the conversation and watched the moment close. Gently, quietly, with no drama. The way these moments always close. And I thought, why can I not do it? I have been saying fine for so long that I cannot find the other sentence. I have used fine so many thousands of times that it has become the only word I have. I am so tired. On the morning of March 14th, Clara woke at 6:45, as she always did. She showered. She dressed in the burgundy blazer she wore when she wanted to feel like herself. She made Sophie's lunch, a sandwich, a red apple, and the small folded note she put in Sophie's lunch every single day since kindergarten. A note that always ended with the same 4 words: I love you always. She kissed David on the cheek when he came downstairs. She handed him his coffee, and she said something to him that he has turned over in his mind every single day since. She said, have a really good day today. Not have a good day. Have a really good day today. He said thanks and took his coffee and picked up his phone and did not think anything more of it. She left the house at 7:52. She drove to Meridian Financial and parked in her usual spot on level 2 of the parking garage, space 14. She sat in the car for 14 minutes before getting out. When she got out, she walked to the elevator and rode it to the 4th floor and walked past Raymond's security station at 8:47, the exact same time she had walked past it every morning for 6 years. She asked Raymond about his daughter Angela, who had just been accepted to Ohio State. He told her. She said, Raymond, that is wonderful. You must be so proud. He was proud. He told her so. He never saw her again. Clara took the elevator to the 4th floor. She sat at her desk. She opened her computer. She responded to 2 emails. She left a note on Janet's desk about a filing deadline the following week. She poured herself a coffee in her navy blue mug. At 9:03 in the morning, she stood up from her desk. She left the coffee. She left her phone. She left her laptop open. She walked toward the stairwell at the far end of the 4th floor, passing 2 colleagues who did not look up, pushing open the stairwell door and walking through it. Nobody looked up. She did not look back. The stairwell door swung closed, and Clara Dawson walked out of Meridian Financial Services, out of the building, and into the morning, and did not come back. By 11 that morning, Janet had texted Clara twice, assuming a doctor's appointment. By early afternoon, she had mentioned to the manager that Clara had not been at her desk since mid-morning. By 3, David had received a call from the manager. By 5, David had called Clara's phone 11 times and driven to every location he could think of. By 7, something in his chest had settled into the specific cold dread of a man who is beginning, against every instinct, to understand. At 9:47 that night, David filed a missing persons report with the Columbus Police Department. He answered every question the officer asked, and then he drove home and sat in the driveway for a long time before he made himself go inside to his children. Tyler and Sophie were still awake. David told them their mother had not come home and that they were looking for her and that everything was going to be okay. Tyler said okay and went upstairs. Sophie asked if Mom was okay. David said she was going to be. He held Sophie for a long moment before she went to bed, and then he sat alone in the kitchen in the dark for a very long time. On the evening of March 16th, 2 days after Clara left, David went into the study looking for the phone number of his mother-in-law's care facility. He found the number, and on his way out of the study, moving past the writing desk, he noticed that the drawer was open an inch. He does not know why he opened it further. He says it was not a decision. His hand simply moved. Inside the drawer, beneath the insurance documents, was a dark blue journal. He picked it up. He read the first line, and then he sat down on the floor of the study and he read every single word of 11 years of his wife's interior life, and he did not get up from that floor until the sun was coming through the study window the next morning. Tyler found him at 7:15, dressed for school, and looked at his father's face, understood that something enormous had happened, and sat down on the floor beside him without saying anything. They sat there together, the dark blue journal between them, the sun coming in through the window, the house quiet around them. Clara had walked 17 blocks from Meridian Financial to the Columbus Greyhound bus terminal after leaving the building at 9:03. She paid $40 cash for a ticket to Lexington, Kentucky, 170 miles south. She arrived in Lexington that afternoon and checked into a motel on the south side of the city, paying cash for 3 nights and requesting a room away from the street. She had no luggage. She had her wallet, her keys, and the burgundy blazer. She ate at a diner 2 blocks from the motel on each of the 3 evenings she was in Lexington. She always took the same booth by the window. She always ordered the same thing, chicken soup and a piece of cornbread. She always sat for about an hour looking out of the window at the ordinary traffic of a Kentucky city on an ordinary weeknight. The waitress, a woman named Clara who had worked that diner for 11 years, told investigators she had noticed Clara the first evening and that something about her stillness had registered as the stillness of someone who needed something she could not identify. So Carla had brought extra crackers without being asked. Both evenings. She said, "I wanted to do more and I did not know how. So I brought the crackers. And I set them beside the soup without saying anything." On the morning of March 18th, the 4th day, Clara left the motel and walked to the Lexington Greyhound terminal. She did not buy a ticket. She sat down on one of the hard plastic benches in the main waiting area and stayed there for hours, watching people arrive and leave, watching buses pull in and pull out, watching the ordinary motion of lives with destinations. Clara had no destination. A station employee named Gary, who had worked the morning shift at the Lexington terminal for 9 years, noticed her at around 10 in the morning. He noticed her the way you notice someone who has been in the same place too long without the purpose that a bus terminal requires. He went to the break room. He poured a second cup of coffee. He brought it to her. He sat down beside her on the bench, not too close. He set the coffee between them. He said nothing for a moment. And then he said, "You doing okay?" Clara picked up the coffee. She held it in both hands the way people hold a hot cup when they are cold or when they need something solid to hold on to. She looked at the arrivals board for a long time. And then she said, "I don't know." She said, "I don't think I have been okay for a very long time." Gary sat beside her. He did not say much. He just stayed. And then he asked if there was someone she wanted him to call. She thought about it for a very long time. And then she said David's name. Gary called David from his personal phone at 11:14 that morning. David was in his truck on a job site when a Kentucky area code appeared on his screen. He answered on the first ring. Gary told him his wife was in Lexington and that she was okay and that she needed him to come. David said he would be there in 2 hours. He was there in 1 hour and 43 minutes. He walked through the terminal entrance, and Gary walked him across the waiting area to the bench where Clara was sitting. David sat down beside his wife. He put his arm around her, and Clara Dawson leaned her head against his chest. Fully, completely, without managing it, without performing it. For the first time in 20 years in front of another person, she let herself be held. They sat on that bench for 10 minutes before either of them spoke. David said her name. She said she was sorry. He said, "Don't be. Let's go home." Clara was admitted voluntarily to the psychiatric unit at Ohio Health Riverside Methodist Hospital in Columbus on March 19th. She would remain there for 22 days. On the 4th day, David brought Tyler and Sophie to visit. Sophie came through the hospital room door and crossed the room before anyone else had moved, the way she had always done everything, with her whole heart first, and climbed onto the bed and put her head against her mother's chest. Clara said that in that moment, for the first time she could clearly remember, she felt her daughter without the glass. Not through something, not muffled or at a distance. She just felt her daughter, just there. And she cried. Not the managed, controlled, alone in the study kind of crying. She cried the way a person cries when they have finally completely stopped performing being fine. Tyler came to the bed and sat on the other side of her. David sat in the chair beside the bed. And for the first time and longer than any of them could clearly remember, the 4 Dawsons were fully in the same room with each other. Not the performance-organized version of themselves. Just themselves. During her 22 days at Riverside, Clara was formally diagnosed with persistent depressive disorder, the condition she had been living with since at least her early 20s. She began medication. She began real sustained therapy. She and David began couples therapy, not because their marriage was broken, but because they had agreed that the version of their marriage that had allowed 11 years of silence was a version they needed to understand and to change. The medication, Clara told me, did not make her happy. What it did was make the glass thinner. And thinner, she said, is everything. David told me, the hardest thing to sit with is not the years I didn't know. The hardest thing is the moments I almost knew. The dinner table in November. The time she sat in the dark in the car and said she was fine, and I believed her. I had been leaning on her steadiness my entire adult life. I had been so grateful for it that it never once occurred to me to ask what it was built on. That is the thing I cannot put down. Not that I didn't know, but that I didn't ask. 9 months after her discharge, I sat with Clara Dawson at the kitchen table in the house on the west side of Columbus. Tyler's baseball schedule was on the refrigerator. Sophie's drawings were above the window. A coffee was going cold between Clara's hands. She was warm and present and attentive. The smile was still there, but it was different now. It reached her eyes in a way that felt less managed, less maintained at cost. I asked her, if you could find the one moment where something could have been different, where would it be? She thought for a long time. And then she said, the dinner table. November 2020. David looked at me and asked if I was okay, and I wanted so badly to say something true. The door was right there, and I smiled, and said I was tired, and watched it close. She paused, and then she said, if one person, just one, at any single point in those 20 years, had looked at me and said, wait, I don't think that is the whole answer. Tell me more. I believe I would have talked. I believe the door was always unlocked from my side. I just needed someone to knock on it like they genuinely meant to come in. Clara Dawson is still here. She walks every Sunday morning with Sophie. She shows David entries from her new journal. Tyler is the kind of young man now who notices when the people around him go quiet and asks about it and waits for a real answer. Sophie wants to be a psychiatrist. The glass is thinner. It may never be fully gone. But Clara is no longer alone on the other side of it. So before you close this video, I am going to ask you to do one thing. Think of one person in your life who always seems fine. The capable one, the strong one, the one everyone goes to, the one who has not, in recent memory, told you they were struggling. Reach out to them today. Not a text with an emoji, a real conversation. And when they say they are fine, because they will say they are fine, they always say it first, press past it. Say, I know, but I am asking because I mean it. I have time. Tell me something true. That is all Clara ever needed. Someone to knock on the door like they genuinely meant to come in. If anything in Clara's story felt personal, if you are the capable one in someone else's life and you have been saying fine for longer than you can remember, please know that help is available and that asking for it is not a weakness. It is the bravest version of the strength you have been spending on everyone else for years. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Call or text 988 from anywhere in the United States at any time of day or night. That number is in the description below this video. Please share this video with the person in your life who needs to hear Clara's story today. Not for this channel, for that person. Subscribe so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. And in the comments, let us know where you are watching from. And tell us, was there ever someone in your life who smiled every single day and you only found out later what it was costing them? This is where that conversation begins. This has been Tales of Human Shadows. Every shadow has a story. This is where they live.